So kids want to avoid conflict. And they want to avoid conflict so much that if they see by not seeing another parent or seeing them less, they will have less conflict. They will do that.
Hello, and welcome to today's episode of The Positively Healthy Mom. I'm your host, Laura Olinger, teen and parent well-being coach and founder of Positively Healthy Coaching. I'm very excited to introduce you to my guest today, Ginger Gentile. Ginger is a groundbreaking expert she's the director of Erasing Family, which is a documentary, and their mission is simple yet powerful: to give you the proven strategies, compassionate guidance, and unwavering support that you need to heal and reconnect with your child. So, Ginger, tell us what that means. What is this all about?
Well, thank you so much, Laura, for having me on. So, as a parenting coach, when parents get divorced, the vast majority of moms and dads eventually learn to get along. Obviously, there's a reason why they got divorced. If things were great, you wouldn't get divorced. But usually after a few months or a year, they're able to make some agreements, maybe even be in the same room with each other, hopefully maybe even celebrate a holiday together. But about 10 to 20% of the divorces you'll find get worse over time. I know because my parents had a horrible divorce when I was 13, and I was happy when they got divorced because finally I'll have some peace. And it got worse, not better over time. And they actually ended up fighting with each other for about 15, 20 years with the kids in the middle. There's various degrees of this. We can call this a high conflict divorce. But if one parent gains the upper hand with a child and convinces that child that the other parent is bad for them or prevents them from seeing the other parent, this can become something that we commonly and popularly refer to as parental alienation. That's when a child is turned against the other parent. It's a fancy term, but we all know of kids who had a good relationship with a mom or a dad, and then after the divorce, it seems to really go off the rails. And also, if the kid gets older, sometimes this is referred to as estrangement. In the court system, it's referred to as sometimes resist and refuse, when a child resists or refuses to go to a visit. It could also be called emotional triangulation. A lot of fancy terms for an interference in the natural order, which is a child loves and respects a healthy parent. Now, what I've seen in my work and as the director of the Erasing Family documentary, which your listeners can find on YouTube and watch for free, is there's a lot of shades of gray here. So the big issue that we have found is that parents who consider themselves alienated or estranged or blocked see themselves as a victim. It's completely possible that they are a victim.
Yeah.
There's often things that they're doing without knowing that's making it worse. Now, in an extreme example, you have two parents who are fighting so much against each other and one parent wins. So they're both trying to alienate the other parent and one's better at it.
Yeah.
And then we'll see cases where there's one parent who maybe had no history of this, is very easygoing, is very loving, and they get sucked into this vortex with another parent who then uses the kids as a way to punish the other parent.
Yeah.
So we see this often in cases of domestic violence. I work with a lot of moms who are victims of domestic violence. And I'm using, domestic violence could also mean threats, emotional violence. And then when this ends, it's a way for the abuser to maintain control. So it becomes domestic abuse by proxy. But in all of these cases, whether a person is, 100% victim or 5% a victim, there are things that they are doing that makes the situation worse. This could be a trauma response from their childhood, or it could be a trauma response from not seeing their kids. But I'm going to give you and your listeners a very clear example.
Okay.
You're a mom. Imagine that you couldn't see your kids for 6 months.
That would be awful.
How do you think you would show up in court?
Oh, I would be, very emotional, I would be pleading. I would be like, I need to see my kids. This isn't fair, right? Like, what's happening? This isn't right. Kind of the injustice of it.
Right. Very common. And then what can happen is the judge will say, well, you're emotionally unstable. And the abuser, the alienator, will come in very calm, very cool with evidence, saying, well, I want them to see their mom. It's just she's very unstable at times. I think she might drink. And then you go, I don't drink. How dare you accuse me of drinking? I haven't had a drink in 2 years. And then the judge says, well, let's order some alcohol blood tests to see what's going on here. And it but then also what happens that we found is the professionals who will be assigned to this case won't want to help you because they see you as unstable. You're pleading. You become the annoying client. Your friends think, well, maybe there's something she did wrong.
Yeah.
The school system might find it easier. So it just begins to spiral out of control. Then you get more and more desperate. You've been telling these stories and then you're like, it's a movie and nobody wants to get involved with the movie.
Yeah.
So this is
it actually does make you look crazy, even though you weren't initially crazy, but you're going down this spiral that it turns you into someone that you're not or you weren't.
Right, exactly. And what's sad and tragic is that we have a court system and also a system with a lot of professionals involved who try to seek who's at fault, who's to blame. And what we have found with my team at Reversing Parental Alienation is that when we say it's about responsibility, how can we show up better? How can you show up as the parent your kids need, as the co-parent, even a horrible abusive narcissist can deal with, that the professionals in the case want to interact with, things can begin to change. And they can begin to change quickly because you're removing a stimulus. So for example, if someone's abusive and they want to see you suffer, and I work with a lot of moms who I say, we need to get you to a point where you just accept that this is what's going on and you at least outwardly don't seem so concerned. Of course you're concerned. But if you go, or if the kids say, I hate you, mom, you go, yeah. Sometimes teenagers hate their mom. Yeah, it's common. Things begin to calm down because there's not this stimulus. Now, what a lot of parents going through this forget is that if the child is being alienated or kept from you, they're being raised by a person who's doing that, and they might take on some of these traits. So then you, as the parent who's being kept from your children, need the skill set and the emotional resilience to deal with a child who will come back and maybe be very upset, angry. They might be lying. They might steal. I don't want to say, so I never like to paint a horrible picture, but this is what can happen. And I think a lot of parents have the fantasy that if they can just get their kids, everything will be fine. And they have to rebuild a relationship from a different starting point than where they were at in the beginning.
So when you're helping a mom rebuild these skills or build these skills, I guess, for the first time, what is the method or strategy that you're using to deal with, I guess, the pain? Maybe that's what that resilience is, because there's nothing to me more unnatural than a mom being kept from her children. Like that just for me defies everything this universe is about, right? Like that is connection, that's loving connection. That's kind of like they're in our room, they come out, that's we rate, they came out of our bodies, right? And so it's like, I guess that's what you're working on. Like, how do you address that pain and that raw feeling?
Yeah, that's a great question, Laura. So what this is not is pretending like everything's okay when it isn't.
Okay.
So a lot of times with a mom will be, okay, let's admit that this is awful and unfair and adjust. Give yourself time and space to feel those feelings and honor those feelings. Sometimes with a client, I'll even say, let's schedule time, and it might be once a week or even once a day to feel that and to cry. And you put an alarm on, and then you have to put it in a box. And when you're able to put it in that box, that's when we get into strategy mode. So this isn't saying I'm okay with not seeing my kids. It's being calm enough in an interaction where they're not pushing your buttons, because what they're trying to do is to say something or do something that will drive you crazy. They record that, and now that becomes evidence to the judge, but it could also be evidence to the children, right? I'm working with a mom now who had a restraining order placed against her, which is very common. She's now able to see her kids. She's made great progress. But basically, 5 years ago, she cried in front of the kids and she cried in front of a police officer. That's been used against her now for 5 years because this was during COVID.
Oh, wow.
So every time it's like let's talk about what happened 5 years ago with this crying incident. And this just keeps getting used against her. And what's important here is to acknowledge, you know what? You're right. I shouldn't have cried.
Mm.
I'm now working on being more emotionally stable.
Mm-hmm.
What you don't want to do is to say, well, everybody cries. It's not a big deal. Or, well, I was crying because he was trying to take the kids away from me. So when we begin to argue, and this is a great principle for your listeners, if there's one takeaway,
Mm-hmm.
the more you argue with the facts, even when you're right, the more guilty you seem.
Oh.
And the more you just say, okay, that's interesting. Thanks for sharing. Or that must be really tough. I acknowledge that. Or even saying, I have a different memory, but that's not what's important here. What's important is my crying was very upsetting to the kids 5 years ago. And I am now in a program. I'm getting coaching. I'm doing therapy. So I'm emotionally stable. And you can see that I haven't cried in front of the kids in 5 years.
Mm.
That's a very different answer than, well, of course I cried. It was the middle of COVID. You sent the cops to my door and you kept the kids from me from 5 years. So we're discussing me crying. And these little things can be so taken against the parent by the professionals,
Mm.
by the other parent. They can really be blown out of proportion. So
Mm-hmm.
it's very important to always maintain an emotional regulation in public, in front of other
Mm.
people. What you do
Mm-hmm.
in private, what you feel in private. I've had clients write novels, memoirs, stand-up comedy routines, songs, artwork about this to express the pain. It is painful, but we need to get you to a spot where you are unbothered by their attempts to get you to show that pain, because that's what they're trying to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Could you give our listeners some examples of what it looks like to have really small, almost I want to call it like micro actions of parental alienation? And like I have one that comes to mind that as I was educating myself
Yeah,
about this topic several years ago, I learned like if your child receives a gift from the other parent and they bring it to your house, obviously it's there, right? It's in the room. And I've heard examples of like people taking that gift or hiding that gift because it's so upsetting for that parent to have, and it could be something silly, right? Like, or a picture frame of the other parent in that child's room,
right.
right? And so can you kind of speak into that? Because I think sometimes when I know when I hear the word parental alienation, that is like shut the door, complete no contact, which is what we talk about in the documentary. But like, what are those little micro actions that kind of start to turn the child's thoughts and feelings against that parent?
Right. That's a great question. So if we have a list of alienating behaviors, I'm going to guess that most parents going through a divorce have done one at some time. And that does not mean that you are alienating.
Mm-hmm.
When it becomes a pattern and when the goal becomes, at least, subconsciously, the goal is to destroy the relationship or to keep the child close or to protect the child when there's no real fear, this can be very damaging when it's a pattern. So first of all, for your listeners, if at one point, the child brought home a gift and they said, the tennis shoes are the wrong size. Okay. Yeah, maybe we could work on that. That's not alienating. But if every gift that's brought home is hidden, taken away, or said, oh, what a stupid gift, or, well, at least he tried, but he obviously doesn't know how to give good gifts. So the most subtle would be like, you don't have to go if you don't want to.
Mm.
Um, if you don't go, instead of going to see your dad, I brought tickets to this fun event.
Mm.
Calling the other parent by their first name, always pointing out their faults. Now, the child is half of both parents.
Right.
So this also is damaging to the child. And part of the acceptance is, okay, I chose to have a child with this person. And this is one of the exercises I do with clients often when they're really upset with the other parent, is to energetically, kind of declare, so not to the other person, not to their kids, you have the right parent.
Mm.
And I do it all over again to have you. And some parents are like, I don't want to say that. I'm like, I get that. But otherwise you're saying to the kid, you're a mistake. And that's what your
Right.
energy is giving. So kids want to avoid conflict.
Yeah.
And they want to avoid conflict so much that if they see by not seeing another parent or seeing them less, they will have less conflict. They will do that. The other thing to keep in mind is that teenagers are much easier to alienate than little kids.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Tell us about that.
Because a little kid, let's say the mom creates this whole story to the kid and says, dad is bad. And the 5 or 6-year-old will parrot that. And then if someone says, what do you like to do with your dad? They're like, oh, I love playing baseball with my dad. They can't keep a narrative.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a teenager, if you tell a 16-year-old, if you don't see your mom, I'll buy you a Tesla.
Yeah.
And the teenager goes, Tesla.
Yeah.
So all I have to do is say mom's awful, I don't want to see her. Yeah, and I get you a Tesla. Or at my house, there's no rules.
Yeah. I've seen that.
Yeah, at my house, there's no rules. So of course they're not going to want to see the other parent who has rules.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And then that parent is like, well, every time I discipline, they're like, well, I can do whatever I want at dad's house. So what a healthy parenting looks like at this situation is helping the child to adjust to know what they're feeling is normal. And then if it's not a safety concern, giving them skills or strategies to maintain the relationship as much as possible. Now, what everybody knows, including the courts, including lawyers, is that once a child is in their mid to late teens, they really can't be forced. They can't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's keeping that door open and even if it's like, well, your dad is who he is. What can we learn from this? What can we do to adjust this? How can is there some activity you can do? Right? So we try to be as neutral as possible and let the kids find their own way. Now, one thing that I've seen with the moms who I work with, because I work with mom and dads, but mainly moms, and that's just, I don't know, I tend to attract more moms for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
Because probably more dads suffer from this, or it's about the same, but most of my clients are moms.
Quick pause in this episode to tell you on April 30th at noon Central Time, I'm hosting a free webinar for moms called Get Through May Without Losing Your Joy, Your Mind, or Yourself. And if that title just hit you somewhere, go save your spot right now at positivelyhealthycoaching.com. If you can't make it live, no worries. Sign up anyway in advance and I'll send you the recording.
When women are married and in the mom role, they will often become like the CEO of the household and they're organizing every schedule and they're doing all the appointments. So one way that even if they're alienated, they can still try to get involved. So accepting that the child's relationship with the other parent is their relationship.
Mm-hmm.
It prevents disappointment. And when you have a lot of conflict in between two parents who have divorced, the best thing for the child is to interact less.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
For example, dad drives the kids to school and they're always late. Let the school and the truancy officer deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
I had a mom, she's being alienated from her kids, one of her kids. The kid has tons of truancy problems. And then she called up the school and got them like removed to help her son. And it's like, that's sweet, I understand this, but
the dad needs to face the consequences. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And also if you go back to court, truancy is considered a big issue. So, but the less we can get involved, because then also what can happen is, hey, you're texting your ex. Hey, make sure you leave 5 minutes early because there's snow on the road, right? And then the reaction, moms and dads will do this, will be like, oh God, they're not going to say this. What a nag. I'm going to block the person more.
Mm-hmm.
So it's about relaxing and just being like, okay, it is what it is. So the more it's like, it is what it is. This is what we got. This is what we're working with. The better it is for the children to be able to go back and forth and develop their own relationships and their own observations over time.
Mm-hmm.
And the more, because what I see as a pattern is when people make these small issues very big issues, then there's just constant fighting and turmoil. And the children always feel like they're in a war zone. They can never be safe. Now, this is important for the moms listening who are being alienated. What this also means, if there's all this ongoing conflict, the kid's never going to come back. Why would they switch sides with an ongoing war?
Mm-hmm.
So we have to be very careful about what is truly important to focus on and to raise and complain about, and what we unfortunately have to let go.
Man, this has been really powerful. I usually talk a lot more during podcasts, but I just wanted to give you really the voice here, because what you're doing, the work that you're doing is so important. And so what is, with the minute or two we have left, like what is the last kind of most important bit you can share for the moms today?
95% of the time when I work with somebody, this has been going on in their family for generations. Sometimes in different ways. So it could be that there's a history of abandonment in the family. It could be this pattern. Sometimes people say, oh yeah, this happened with my uncle. This happened with my mom, my grandma, my great-grandma. And so it's a little more vague. If you can change the dynamic, you're giving a gift to your children, which is that they won't repeat this pattern. What we know from statistics is that children who are alienated have a 50% chance of being alienated themselves or becoming an alienator.
That makes so much sense. Yeah.
Because that's what they grew up with. That's what they think is normal. And I've even seen some cases where people will begin to alienate when the child turns 5 and her dad was alienated when she turned 5. So she's doing the same thing subconsciously, right? This is not always a conscious campaign, but sometimes people just begin to repeat these patterns. So if you can stop this pattern, you are giving your children a beautiful gift.
Yeah.
And part of that is if you're able to show up in a calm way, your children will also learn how to calmly respond to the other parent. And also, unfortunately, people with these personality traits, which probably we can call narcissism or high conflict behavior, they're everywhere. So they're probably going to run into them again, and we don't want them marrying someone like this. So the more that we can create a calm thing, it is what it is. This is how we can deal with this person. We're not going to, I always say, they have an express train to Crazy Town. You don't have to get on the train. The train can go by itself. And then at one moment, the kids will say, I want to get off the train. But if we try to pull them off the train, right, it actually makes more resistance. So the more that you can show up healed and calm, the more your children will be attracted to you. Not because you're saying the truth, not because you are speaking truth to power or telling your side of the story. But when they see that you're calm, loving, and accepting, they are drawn back to that. It does take work. It can be hard work, but it's rewarding and it's not impossible. There is hope.
So powerful. That's just amazing. Thank you. I already know people that I am going to send your way, because I know several situations like this. So how can people find you?
So the easiest way for people to get in touch with us, if they want help on their alienation case, we work with moms and dads who are in the middle of divorce process. I've worked with parents who haven't filed for divorce yet. And we also, our longest success case was a mom who was 12 years no contact with her daughter. Her daughter's in her early 30s, no way to contact her daughter, and they got back together. So we work on both sides. And the best way to contact us is to go to reversingparentalalienation.com. And there we have a form where people can take a free assessment to see how we can help them. They'll also be placed on our email list, and we often hold free and affordable events for people to learn about our methodology. And they can find us on social media under the tag for our film, Erasing Family. So if they go to YouTube, Instagram, or Facebook, we're on Erasing Family, and they can also watch the film for free on YouTube.
Ginger, thank you so much for your time. This was amazing. And I am just really wanting to send you kind of like some support and love, because I'm sure you see a lot of stuff. And so I bet your self-care is super important, and getting support, because it's like we're human, right? And sometimes being in painful situations can be hard. We have to have those, boundaries, that emotional kind of cutaway. That'll be the last question. Do you have any tips for how you kind of step back into your own world so that you're not like living in this all the time?
Sure. It's a great question. And I tend to be one of those people who overworks too much. So what I will say is, if anyone contacts me, I don't coach over email or text message. So, and I also believe that giving advice or tips does not replace having a system and support.
Yeah.
So if someone contacts me after listening to this podcast, this happened with my kid, I will say, I'm so sorry for you. you can join us in this way, but I'm not going to answer that over email because also I don't have the full situation.
Right.
I could give really bad advice. And I've heard stories with other coaches who have gotten people arrested because they didn't know there was a restraining order in the background. So you don't want to do that. So that's part of the way too. And then I would say going out into nature as much as possible. And this is, I think, the hardest one as a coach. We can walk the walk with people. We can go on the journey with them, but ultimately it's up to them. We're not their ambulance.
Yeah.
We can't rescue people. What we can do is we can show them a possible path forward. They can choose to take that path. And there'll always be clients who I work with who don't want to take that path. And then we have to say, many blessings and I hope it works out, but we can't drag them down the path that we think that they should go down.
That's a very exact same philosophy I have. I say we can open the door, we can show them the door, we can show them the door frame, show them the doorway, but they have to be the one that step through that. So yes, taking that action on their own. Well, Ginger, thank you again, and I so appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me on, and I hope that anyone's listening to this who's suffering from this reunites and heals soon.
Beautiful.
When you get a chance, please go to the show notes and click on the link ratethispodcast.com/tphmom to give my podcast a rating and review. And if this episode resonates with you, be sure to share it with your mom friends who are going through the same things. Be sure to tune in for next week's conversation. Until then, keep up the good work.